I feel like I need to defend my scene's honor here, because this is just turning into a bit of a dog battle.
Like in groups, always look.
I'm cutting you off here. I'm cutting you off. Cutting you off. He said G2's winning it. He said G2's winning it.
We need to wait till the next EU tournament, which could be in about 10 years now.
Take it with like a grain of salt.
No,
but
that's
that
no
being
fun.
said,
Take it super literally.
Spike defused.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Press 4 to Defuse. This time it's Press 2 to Defuse. There's only two of us. Ryan couldn't make it to the show, so you're going to be stuck with just us two. I am Darth Mike. This is Sam, and we're going to be taking you through a wild week in Valorant. A wild week for you as well, Sam. How are you doing?
geez, I'm still coming down. Like all of my friends have just been like, wow, it's so good to see you like so excited about things. Cause so like insider stuff, you know, about a year ago, I was like, well, maybe I'll just hang it all up. You know, it's not working. It's not happening. I'm done with this. And the last couple of months, it's been kind of lackluster and not really sure if, but I kept going. You know, the passion doesn't stop. The drive doesn't stop. Had the biggest event of my life. So I'm still not, I still haven't quite recovered from that.
For anyone who's had their head in the sand, been full ostriching it, our very own Sam just covered the FTW event paired with Golden Boy as a caster, which is, that's awesome. Really cool. It was amazing to watch. I didn't get to see much of it live because I was helping my girlfriend move all weekend, but catching up on it, it's been quite an exciting show, and you all did a heck of a job. But that's enough kudos for now, because we've got so many topics to cover today, folks. Just we'll start with the EU, but the NA side of things, it's ROSTERMANIA. Everything's exploding. Every team is shuffling. It's madness, folks. Madness. So we are going to go ahead and get on into it. If I find the right stinger, here we go. Wait, no, wait. There we go. Boom. Stinger. Fancy transition. It's time for our first segment here. It's Run It Back. It's the part where we talk about what's happened in the last week. And that's honestly going to be most of the show, because we had 3 big events and we've had a million different roster changes. Starting with the roster changes, we've got, as soon as I find the right tab here, we've got, first of all, the EU side of things. Now, Bonk, we knew this was going to happen. They had been playing with him. They've now officially announced it, plus Draken. Sam, what do you make of this?
Unsurprising, really. So Draken recently was playing with a team called Inferno in a couple of tournaments, and they did reasonably well, and he was kind of a standout player. So this is really unsurprising that he was the person that they decided to pick up. It still remains to be seen if he is intended as a replacement for Safe or Aaron. I suppose you don't ever get told, we're specifically replacing this player with this player. You just kind of find out that it happens. But that brings Bonk up to 4 players. We're still waiting to hear about a 5th, because Safe obviously announced his leaving, and so did Aaron. So that's still 1 person down, waiting with bated breath to see not only where those 2 players go, but who the 5th is going to be for Bonk.
It'll be interesting to see. It certainly will. We've got one other piece of EU news. This is, again, sort of similar. We've got a new coach, folks, coming on into NIP. And this is a team that needs some direction, because they are floundering. They're not doing very well. They didn't perform very well at the Blast Invitational. They haven't been performing really well in any of their events, to be quite frank. They have not been. I mean, really, it's a top 2 in EU right now, and they're not a threat to those top 2 at all. But Emil's coming in. He's going to provide a little direction. Do you think this might be the answer that NIP needs here, Sam?
Potentially. The funniest thing about this to me, not about email, but just like Nip, the tweet that they posted when they were looking for a coach was, do you know how to beat G2? Well, we're looking for a coach, which I thought was hilarious, but it's poignant. It was to the point.
Yeah.
And I think that Emil, you know, coming from the Overwatch background, and of course there is like CS experience kind of mixed in there as well, I think that he's going to bring some direction to the team. But again, I mean, it remains to be seen how much he'll actually contribute. Don't get me wrong, I think having a coach will do a lot, but there are still certain ceilings. Ryan was saying he thought that possibly Safe might come in to replace Fearoth. And again, that's one of those things that remains to be seen. Are they going to shake up some of their players? We've said it before. This is the perfect time to do that, kind of in this lull in the season. I'm hoping that they're planning to do a little bit more than just get a brain driving behind them.
Yeah.
Although we are going to talk about this a little bit later, but that brain has come up with some very interesting ideas. But we'll get there.
It has indeed. It's gonna be interesting. They really did, or we really did see a lot of change up in compositions. But yeah, we'll talk about that more when we get into that in just a moment. That's our EU news. I think that covers us in EU roster changes. Now we're going across the pond to my home turf, where we have so many changes, folks. So many changes. No roster is safe, it seems, except I guess probably Sentinel, since they keep winning a lot of things. But the first one on the docket is possibly the most impactful for the top end of the scene. We have a shake-up in Envy. Envy had just had a phenomenal placing. They were a dark horse team for many in pretty much every tournament that we had. Now they may be moving out of that dark horse territory and into the light. Aegis and Calypso have been moved to the reserve roster. Crashies and Food, the players who recently stepped back from that T1 roster, are now going to be playing in the starting lineup. And this is fascinating to me. Food was obviously announced first, and as soon as Food was announced, you knew that Crashies was likely going to be following him. Since they stepped down together, we knew that they wanted to play together as a unit. But this is interesting. It's a ton of firepower reinforcing what was already a very strong team. They're might be missing some of the roles that were coming in. I know in particular Aegis was their secondary caller in a lot of situations, and he brought a lot to the team beyond just his individual performance. But purely on paper, you look at the firepower that Crashies and Food are bringing in terms of what they can do, in terms of the heads that they can click. This, I think, now is a team that you have to acknowledge in contention for that top spot in NA, and that could really push a Sentinels or a TSM for that top docket in the North American scene.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We kind of speculated a little bit last week about where the heck Food and Crashies were going to go. And now this wasn't one of the teams we expected that they might go to, but it brings a much needed level up. Not needed in terms of they were doing really badly, but needed in terms of just that little bit extra to kind of pep them over the edge. Now, they have been getting some fairly consistent results up until this point, but there was always that kind of something missing, something that they needed to give them that little bit of an extra edge. Like you said, they kind of had the dark horse potential. Everyone looked at this roster and said, wow, good roster, so much potential there, but never quite managing to get to that kind of top 4, top 3 place. Now managing to level up a couple of their players, that's going to mean so much. I mean, TSM have already been looking a little bit shaky recently. Let's not forget their unfortunate run against Dignitas quite recently. And of course, Sentinels has been quite consistently getting the better of them. Of course, they do manage to snag a few wins against Sentinels, but it has been kind of neck and neck for these two teams. And now throw Envy into the mix as well. And I think that NA, I'm not going to get into the NA-EU debate, but I think in terms of how competitive the top layer of the cake is, NA is looking so much better in that regard. Like, EU is like G2, everyone else.
It's
NA
definitely more interesting.
Exactly. Like, there's so much more potential for upsets.
There definitely is. I also have some more context. We've got some more context in general on the Envy decision. I see that Doug in chat is saying that was their best performance of the year they just had, and now they make this change coming off it. Two pieces of context for that. First, we're gonna talk about the big one. This one's quite surprising. Obviously, there's a lot of speculation in the North American Valorant scene. We talked about it last week about the ESIC investigation and the repercussions that could have in the space. Now, we don't know whether either of these players were directly implicated, the players who removed Aegis and Calypso, but there is this from Tailspin, the Envy manager, who wanted to clarify some details about the removal of the players. And I'm just going to read this because I think it gives a lot of context both in what it says and what it doesn't say. I want to address some uncertainty in the community regarding our inactive roster. There was a lot of speculation. Both these players, this is my editorial commentary, both these players were being removed because of the match fixing thing. Both players were moved for completely unrelated reasons. Aegis in particular was just a casualty of us now having a 6-player roster and making the difficult decision of what 5 we want to invest in. So he clears Aegis very specifically, no commentary on Calypso. To me, who knows what exactly is going to come out, but obviously I think they weren't pleased with Calypso in some aspect.
That's kind of a read between the lines situation. And as you said, Food and Crashies wanting to be picked up as a duo, that would explain the whole 6-man roster dilemma, and you can't bench one of them because, again, they want to be a duo. So, yeah, very difficult decision as to who they wind up benching. Although, we say difficult decision. When it was announced, before they had announced who was being benched, a lot of people were saying, I think it was before, because Crashies was announced first, if I remember correctly.
Food was announced first.
Food was announced first. And then a lot of people were debating, so who's getting the boot? And it was always between Calypso and Akis. And I don't know how telling that is. Calypso, obviously, for very different reasons. And then Akis, like a lot of people were saying, well, he wasn't performing as well, blah, blah, blah. There was like always, different reasons there. But it was always between those two. So probably a difficult decision, but not so difficult that you would give up the new duo that you're bringing in.
I also have one other piece of inside information. This one's sourced directly from the horse's mouth. It was also just too good of an opportunity for Envy to pass up, and the reason is there was no buyout. T1 did not charge a buyout for these two players. There was no buyout associated with them. I don't know whether there was a buyout at any point written into their contract and T1 just waived it because they wanted to be able to move on and get Food and Crashies off their books. But I do know that there was no money involved in a buyout for these players. It was just a move to a new org. Crashies and Food making the move, coming over, and being fully signed to Envy. So that, to me, look, you have two very talented players available for free who have shown a top level, who were the top performers on that T1 roster coming in, and they're available for you. I agree. It's too good of an opportunity to pass up. You got to jump at that one. And I think this really does reinforce Envy to be my contender for top 1 in NA. It's a team that I have no choice but to stand. With the players they have on it right now. I mean, you put Crashies, you put Caboose on a team, you put Mummy out there. I can't help it. This is just too exciting. These are players who I've been watching in Counter-Strike for years, and a lot of players, I mean, when we're talking about Caboose, when we're talking about Crashies, when we're talking about Food, who I've wanted to have bigger opportunities because I knew they could step up to the plate and just never quite got the shot. Well, now they're getting the shot. They're getting the shot, and they're going to have their chance to prove themselves. I'm really excited to see what this roster can do. I think this is going to be a major contender in North America. I'm excited.
And that's so funny because obviously you kind of draw that from your CS background, and me with my Overwatch background, I'm out here like, Sentinels, FaZe, let's go.
I think that's the most fun thing for me about the Valorant scene is that so many players who I've watched languish in sort of the semi-pro to bottom of pro tier in North America, where they were clearly talented, they clearly had what it took to perform at a higher level, but they didn't have the connection, or no one was willing to take a risk on them to bring them up to that pro scene, to that next point. Seeing them get an opportunity to really play at the top of the scene, that to me is so exciting, so very exciting. Now, speaking of an org that comes from a CS background and has just made changes, this is the other big change. We'll talk about it when we get to the event a bit more, but it's been a disappointing run of events for Complexity, and they have made a change. They're benching 2 players, taking them to the inactive roster. It would be Calm and Frisco. I know that I see Calm in our chat here. Yep, that is you, Calm. That is you. Sad to see you go, but excited to see what the next step is. Obviously, look, the Complexity team wasn't winning anything, and this is not an org that's content to not win anything, that's content to not really be competitive in tournaments. They win out in groups in this Pulse event, and this Pulse event was really the last chance. I suspect they were considering making changes before this. These are the changes that have come through. The only thing that's a little surprising to me is that Calm was one of the players to exit. He seemed to have a lot of firepower for this team, maybe a little bit inconsistent at times in some games, but he brought big fragging potential at times. And so you maybe would have looked at an XP3 as a more natural candidate to leave, but XP3 has a big role in the leadership of the team, presumably. He comes from a coaching IGLing background. It's interesting to see, Sam. What do you make of this one?
Well, that's the thing. I think there's a lot of intricacies and nuance within a team that you and I, the average layman, aren't really privy to, right? So we can kind of speculate as much as we like, but we don't really know what goes on within a team. That being said, I can't really comment on the inner workings, but what I can say is much like what happened with T1, I feel like change was needed. It was definitely needed. And again, you know, much like with T1, not sure this is the change that was necessarily the right change, but it's something. It's something that's going to give them an opportunity to see what new things will, you know, pop up for them. Hopefully, you know, with a couple new players, maybe they can start to make something happen. I mean, you say like Complexity is an org that doesn't want to lose, and let's face it, what org does?
Yeah.
You know, everybody's kind of out for the victory. And I think that making those difficult decisions, again, you know, you think to Envy and they have to make that difficult decision as well. Who do they bench in the 6-man roster? When you've built a roster, when these guys have played together for some time and you've kind of built up that synergy, that kind of family vibe, it gets difficult to decide, well, who are we getting rid of, quote unquote. It's no easy task, and I don't envy it. Like, I worked for my mom as a manager, and when people needed to get fired, she tried to make me do it, and I refused because I can't fire people. So I don't envy those people. But it was something that needed to happen. So for now, instead of, you know, looking at exactly what the changes are, I'm just going to kind of look to the future and hope that the changes bring about the results that they're looking for.
Hopefully. We've got Com in the chat, obviously, so he's shedding a little bit of light on it, saying that they thought of the game differently and just didn't gel. That happens sometimes when you're putting together a 5. Sometimes a change of scenery is best for both parties. It's an amicable split, it seems. I know that I talked to Com after it happened, and he was saying that that it was probably the best move for him, just to get to a different situation and let everybody go their separate ways. So it'll be interesting to see for both parties whether this is the refresh that's needed, whether this is the change where they can start competing in events and start competing in tournaments. Again, we're going to get to it when we get to Pulse, because holy cow, was that a tale of upsets and disappointments. But before we get there, we've got more roster change to talk about, so let's hop on over. Here's another one of the signed NA orgs that was signed right around the time of Complexity. They're also making changes. They're bringing in a new coach. You can tell he's the coach because he has coach in his gamer tag. It's Coach J, a man who's been coaching in CS for a long time and is now going to be coaching in Valorant. And Retro officially making his debut on the roster. He was playing with them, I believe, but he is now on the roster. So Renegades with a slightly new look. We'll see. They did a bit better than Complexity. They made it out of groups, but then they ultimately only made it, I think, 2 rounds in the tournament before getting eliminated. So maybe this is going to be the revitalized Renegades that they need to be a little bit more competitive as well.
Yeah, I must be honest, these new names, you know, the like CS names don't mean that much to me. So I'll be honest, you know them. But for me, this is kind of cool for me because, of course, I get to learn about new people, new players, new coaches, see how they kind of interact with one another. And again, Renegades, a team that have been doing fairly well. I think they, again, I didn't actually get to watch Pulse because this was a very busy weekend, okay? This Blast, FTW, Pulse, there was a lot going on. But I saw that they kind of topped their group, which in and of itself was pretty good because they had one of the 5-team groups, not the 4-team groups. So that's pretty impressive. And then, as you said, they kind of got knocked out in the playoffs. It does happen like that. But Renegades is a team who I have seen since like 30 Bomb, and they performed really well there. And they've kind of maintained fairly consistent results. And again, it's just another team that it feels like they needed a level up. And as I said, this is the perfect time to do it. And I think the thing I'm looking forward to most here with all of these teams is seeing how all of these changes affect them, you know, once we start getting big actual tournaments again, because it's all good and well to like look at the rosters, look at them on paper and just go, wow, this is going to be great. And then you see them perform and they either exceed your expectations, meet them, or just fall abysmally flat of them. And all 3 of these have happened this weekend. So yeah, I'm pretty excited to see how that's going to affect teams going forward.
It's really a stirring of the pot. We'll just keep going through them, I guess, to see the different pots that have been stirred. Here's BBG with their changes. Torque stepping down. He can't pursue it full time. That's completely reasonable. Other things going on in life, other decisions to be made in life, and as a result, he's stepping down from the roster. That means a spot's now open on Built by Gamers, which is going to be interesting. Not sure who they're going to be bringing in. So we've currently got vacant spots on Complexity. We got vacant spots on Built by Gamers. I know they're going to be trying out and testing some players here and seeing what's going on. But it's going to be interesting to see. And so that's Built by Gamers. There we go. Mashing my buttons to bring it back to our faces. Then we've got Luminosity. They debuted with their new roster. We're going to talk about that in a little bit, but I'll go ahead and show you what changed because they've got a very pretty graphic for it. They brought in Kashange. I think I'm saying that right.
I was about to say, that's how you say that?
So I was casting him in a tournament at one point, and I looked up how to pronounce that. It's Prince in Polish is what that is. But I believe it's Kashange.
You would think as someone that lives in Poland, I might have recognized that.
I know that Ksez is what some people have said. KZ is what a lot of casters wind up calling him because it's just a cop-out. I believe it's about Kashange. That's where it comes in. It's tricky, though. And then Venerated coming in as well, a player that a lot were excited for. He nearly missed his debut because he, I believe, slept through the beginning of this tournament.
Oh my goodness!
Always a great way to make a debut with an org. If they went ahead. All right. Amazing. Apparently, he told him to call it that. Come on, Doug. I believe in you. You can get that Polish pronunciation down.
Yeah, sure.
But it's never a good sign when you sleep through your first game. Fortunately for him, they then ran it all the way to the finals, so that sort of makes up for things. They were playing with their coach at one point, and they beat a team. They dominated a team with a coach in one of the games that I got to watch, which was quite funny. Unfortunate for Luminosity, obviously, and unfortunate for whoever got beat by a coach, but it happens.
It does. It actually does. A similar thing happened with British Hurricane in a tournament last year. Obviously an Overwatch team, and their manager had to step in. Now, she used to be like a pro player, but like she hasn't been for quite some time, and she had to step in. And like they played like a diamond team or something. So, but it was very funny to see.
We've had that happen in CS a couple of times where teams are roster locked for one reason or another, and you have the coach stepping in. Sometimes coaches are former players, and it's like, okay, it's not going to be good, but it'll be fine. And other times coaches have never played in the server, and that's just their nightmare scenario of like, I'm just going to throw flashes for you, and you go kill people. I can't do anything. Like, I will try and be behind them. I don't know what's going to happen here. It's always a bit shaky when you wind up having to have your coach in the server. Definitely not the way you want to be performing. But whatever it is, Luminosity did do a good run, and we can go ahead and get into the tournaments now. I think that covers all the roster changes in NA that I'm aware of at the moment. I'm sure there's probably more coming on. Just this stirring of the pot is going to be interesting, and there's now multiple unsigned teams who are really exciting and who you're going to be looking at. I think it's going to get quite spicy in any scene, and I think we could see a real seismic shift. Maybe not in the top spot, but in like the 3v8 spots could be all completely in flux, if that makes sense. But let's talk about the tournaments. Do we want to start? Like, I'm going to give you dealer's choice here. We got Blast, Pulse, and FTW. I feel like we should save FTW because you're just going to go off into an excitement high again, and I'm going to lose you in the clouds. So we're going to save that one for last. So take your choice. EU, NA. We're doing Blast or Pulse first?
Well, let's do Blast, because that's one that I actually did get to catch a little bit of in between everything else. So Blast was a fun one, I think. Again, you know, it kind of amounted to like a $50,000 show match between 4 teams. Nip performed about as well as we expected. Liquid, all right. So, like, they came out with, like, the most interesting composition. And I'll be real with you. Round 1, it failed miserably. Okay, they're going with a no smokes composition. And I actually have it written down here because I have the memory of a gnat. But it was Reyna, Killjoy, Breach, Phoenix, and Raze. Like the most hyper-aggressive composition you can think of. And then like a Killjoy for when you're on defense, I guess. Because she can really hold down a site. And like I said, first round, complete whitewash. Like it was a disaster. Day 1 did not work out for them. Days 2 and 3 went way better. They weren't able to win out. Let me just double check that. I think, yeah, they beat Ninjas in Pajamas. That was a 2-0. And
Ninjas in Pajamas.
Yeah, but that was, yeah, it's unfortunate. But then they come up against Fun Plus Phoenix, and So the scoreline says 2-0, and you're like, oh, well, guess that comp didn't work. Both maps went to 13-11. It was so ridiculously close. Now, I'm not a massive fan of the no smokes composition, but I think in a meta where ops are getting slightly less play because of like the breach buffs and everything, you can maybe get away with it if you polish it. I mean, they'd only been playing this composition for like a week.
Yeah.
And they managed to push Fun Plus to 13-11. So I think it's not terrible. I definitely would not call it meta. This is definitely one of those like off meta things that you are the only team that will run it with any sort of success. But I think if you can nail the nitty gritty on it, it could be somewhat scary.
Now, I think they did bring in a Jet as well for that Fun Plus series. So they didn't have good smokes, but they did have some smokes, theoretically. It's a weird comp. It really is. I think there's a lot to be spoken for being the counter meta of like everyone expects a team to play a certain way, and then you're just like, we're going to go the opposite direction. Zig when you zag and catch you off guard. I just need to see it actually work.
Yeah.
But that final, we got to talk about that final because this is the first time an EU final has been at all interesting. FPX almost
so
did
close,
it.
Man.
Almost
So
toppled
close.
G2. And I saw that Ali was roasting me for the graphics. Look, my MS Paint skills are unmatched. That is beautiful resolution and definitely legible. But basically, you can see that G2 made a run through the finals with no problems. But then FPX came in on the opposite side of the bracket, came up, and it was a 3-2 final. It was so close. So close. Almost dethroned the Kings.
The really interesting part about that is that G2 come to the winner bracket with a 1-map advantage, okay? First map, FPX wins. Second map, G2. Third map, FPX. And it's a case of like, if they hadn't had that 1-map advantage, this could have been a very different final. And I think that's why you give the map advantage to your kind of winner bracket, you know. For one thing, they came to the winner bracket. Like, you got to get some props for that. But at the same time, it's like, this could have been so different if it had been a best of one, like so many tournaments have been for some reason. FPX win, which is insane because that first map was a 13-7.
Yeah.
And I remember like, I wasn't meant to do the grand final of FTW, and then I get a message at like 6 p.m. my time saying, we'd like you guys to do the grand final. And I'm like, do I take a nap so that I can survive this night?
Oof.
Or do I watch the final of Blast? You bet your ass I watched the final of Blast, and I have no regrets. It was so good. This is the first team to take 2 maps off of G2. It is the first team to push them to this extent. You could see, and I'm so glad that Blast had the player cameras, because, like, okay, production value for Blast was insanely good. It was some of the best that we've seen so far in Valorant.
They're good at that.
And they had the player cams. And, like, you can actually see here, like, map 2, map 3, G2 are sweating. They are, you can see, like, usually they're just like, ha la la, we're killing things, it's all good. And in this one, you can see, like, they're so in the zone for the whole final. It was fantastic. I had so much fun watching that. And I say this every tournament, and it's just like, maybe next time.
Here's the thing, though. They're nipping at the heels. They're getting so close. But is this going to motivate G2 to change things up? Because this was finally the event where it's like, okay, maybe we're not golden gods. Maybe we're not the immortal gods, deities that we have been so far in the Valorant scene. Maybe we are touchable. Maybe we could falter. So let's try and keep that from happening. Let's play things up. Let's change things around and go back to dominate. I need to see a little bit of change from G2 just to keep themselves ahead of everybody. They're doing it. They've been doing it. Mm-hmm. They're finally pushed. Maybe we'll see the gods dethroned. You can only hope. It's so boring when one team wins every tournament without fail. It really is.
It's like, I still remember watching, so the final obviously was a different story, but every game up to the final, I remember watching and just being like, why am I watching this? Because you knew it was telegraphed. And then the final came around and I was like, okay, but it's FPX. And then it was amazing. It was so good. And then you like watch NA tournaments, and
you have no idea what's gonna happen.
You have no idea. We're gonna talk about polls in a sec, and that is the prime example of
I'm gonna pull it up now.
Anything can happen.
You just
Anything.
segued
And
us
it's great.
perfectly. This, I mean,
Great.
Pulse was absolutely a tale of winners and losers. You can see the bracket here. This image is slightly better. I'm not going to say it is better. Slightly better. I've now got people ganging up, including my own girlfriend, to roast me in chat. She's a professional graphic designer, so it makes sense that she would roast me for my MS Paint skills. It's just going to happen here. But look, here's the bracket here. Here we can talk about it. Winners, huge winner, Mamba Mode. Mamba Mode came out and kicked some ass. Took some wins over big teams. They beat China Wen in the first round. That's obviously a strong contender who we've seen winning tournaments. We've seen going deep into tournaments. You take Renegades. They're a big signed org. You take Beast Coast, another signed team. And then you beat Luminosity 3-2 in the finals. Another signed team to take the top spot. I mean, this was an incredible run for Mamba Mode. I've gotten the pleasure to watch them play in open tournaments before, but this is without a doubt the biggest crown they've taken, the biggest feather in their cap, and this is potentially a huge step forward for these players in terms of recognition in the scene.
Yeah. Like, I still remember, I think it was Vansili that tweeted out, he's like, sorry guys if the analysis made no sense at the end of that game, but we were just there like, what? And that's... I think, you know, we kind of mentioned in the last episode about how it was kind of unfortunate that for this tournament, so many of the big teams had pulled out. But again, there's the upswing on that. The upshot is there are these teams that have an opportunity to really show up, to really have a chance to prove, you know, kind of show their mettle. You might come up against a big team during the group stages, get yourself knocked out, and there it is. But had that big team not been in there, maybe a good team, but not like that caliber, is in the game, and maybe you take it to like a 13-11 and it's really close, but you manage to eke it out. You get into the playoffs, you have that run, and you can show people what you're made of. And I think this is such a fantastic opportunity for those teams to do that, particularly a team like Mamba Mode, who, like you said, has been around for a while. They've been in quite a few competitions. They've been pretty consistent. That's like my favorite word, consistent. But now they managed to pip it over the top. And that is a massive feeling. More than anything, I mean, yeah, cool. They've won an Ignition Series event, which in and of itself is like amazing. But for you to know that you've leveled up, you didn't just win a tournament, you've also leveled up. And that's huge. I think that's really something that they can be proud of.
I have a very quick sidebar here. Is Pipit a South Africanism? Where does that come from regionally?
I don't know. Probably British, to be fair.
All right. Not one I've heard before, but I'm here for it. I'm here for it. Other winners of the tournament, Luminosity, obviously making it to the finals right after he made a change, says, hey, this change was pretty good. Things are going pretty well, especially when one of your players sleeps through the beginning of the tournament. You still managed to make a deep run. I think there's a lot on the horizon for Luminosity. I think as they continue to grow with this roster, I'm excited to see what they can do when they're in a tournament against some of those bigger names who passed on this one. When you're looking at the Envies, you're looking at the TSMs, you're looking at the Sentinels of the world. I think Luminosity is a team that we're now going to be putting on a platform with, say, like a Gen G, where we're looking for them to make a run. We're looking for them to be competitive deep into the brackets. And I think they could be quite interesting. Then Beast Coast. I think Beast Coast did very nicely through the bracket. I can pull it back up, but they made a nice deep run. Hadn't really heard a ton from them in the past, so it's just good to see that. It's good to see a deep run in a tournament. Now, the losers. And this was a bad tournament for a lot of teams. The first one, obviously, I'm going to pick on you again, Com, if you're still in the chat. Complexity. This was sort of their last chance with the 5 that they had to see if it could work. And boy, did it not ever work. I mean, they cratered out of this tournament. And obviously, it's what led to the changes. But this was really before... In a lot of their tournaments, they had bad results, but when you looked at the individual games, you're like, okay, they were competitive. They were playing against good teams. They had a bad group draw. Like, this could have gone differently. This event was like, do or die for Complexity, and the answer was die, it seems. That's what I got.
I mean, tell them how you really feel, man.
The thing is, I love those guys. I love those guys. So when I'm saying this, you know it's true, because I do not want to say bad things about that roster. But holy cow, was that a disappointing result for them?
Yeah, I think this is kind of akin to, you know, TSM being knocked out of groups by Dignitas. There's like if you get knocked out of groups by, like, if you get knocked out of groups by Sentinels, cool.
Yeah.
We lost to Sentinel. Everybody loses to Sentinels. That's fine. But when it's one of these like up and coming teams that kind of are just getting into the scene,
a spot up. They lost to Second Wind.
I mean,
it's
yeah,
bad.
it's not a good look. But that being said, they have at least like come to terms with that and have started making changes. Like, the worst thing you can do as a team is to continuously beat your head into the same wall over and over again. I mean, definition of insanity, right? At least they've like kind of isolated what they felt to be the issues, and they are making steps. Or taking steps, not making steps.
I think even before this tournament, they knew that changes were likely needed, and I think the org was probably like, all right, let's give it one more. Let's give it one more, see what happens, and whew, they got their answer. They got their answer. Not a good last ride. Renegades had a similar storyline. They made it out of groups, though, as you said. Strong showing in groups earlier. Just maybe didn't go as deep in the bracket as they were hoping for. I think that it's kind of a little more murky for them. I don't think they're an outright loser. I just don't think it was the winning result that they were hoping for, I guess I'd say.
Oh, I just want to quickly just dip into chat. No, it does not make you toxic if you want to see Sentinels fail. I would very much like to see G2 fail.
Sam's been rooting for G2 to die as a team since the beginning of the game.
I love G2 as an org. Don't get me wrong. They have some of the best socials, some of the best jerseys, some of like the coolest teams. Like, they are fantastic. But for the competitive integrity or just the competitive entertainment of a scene, having one team dominate is boring.
It is.
Nobody wants to watch that. So it sounds really mean when you say, yes, I want this team to fail, but it's not because you don't like the team. It's just because you want something interesting to happen.
Yeah. The other big loser we'll talk about, Space Station didn't get out of groups. They're a signed team. They're a relatively newly signed team. Again, you're looking at them in a tournament like this where the bigger names aren't there to give them space to show, and they didn't get out of groups. Just not a good sign. It doesn't bode well for you long term if you can't compete in this kind of a team or this kind of a tournament. It's going to be tough for you when some of the bigger names are also on the field. So very similar to a Complexity or Renegades, just big signed orgs, lots of name brand recognition. Disappointing result, lackluster result. And now let's talk about what I know you've been excited to talk about all show long. It's FTW. Let's see how terrible my graphic was. I don't even remember what it looks like right now. Let's go to it. No, this one's pretty good. I just took the graphic, which was already pretty, and I just slapped the bracket over it so we could talk about it. That's quality graphic design right here. I am a wizard with MS Paint. Sam, talk to me about FTW.
So first thing I want to point out, I said this on the grand final as well, and it's just something that I need to like shout from the rooftops as often as possible. Magical, first all-female team to win an Ignition Series event. That is like insanely cool for me. They performed so well, and there were a lot of teams going into this on paper that we looked at and just thought, wow, this is going to be scary. I mean, Magical was one of them. We knew that. The others, of course, were GX3. Then there was Dignitas, Hamburgers. Those were the four, like, really big ones. And, of course, those were the ones that came, you know, in first to fourth place. And, geez, like, some of these games were insanely good. I got to give shout-outs to, like, so on Magical, Jazzy, Annie, and Mel. Jazzy is 16.
Yeah, Mel. All right, keep going.
She's like a prodigy. She pixel shoots, and it's insane. Like the crack between a smoke and a wall, and somebody will run across it, and she'll time their movement and flick and get them through the smoke based off what, like, she's insane. She's really good. Annie is an insanely aggressive raise. Half the time she's memeing on people, which is so much fun to watch, you know, style points. And then Mel, what a phenomenal Cypher player. She holds down sight on defense, but then she's still top frags because she's so good at lurking. Like on the offense, her entire team is headed off towards B, and she's like on a solo flanking mission through showers on A, and she'll get like 2 kills and go, all right, guys, feel free to push. I got you. She is so good. So the players on Magical really stood out for me in this tournament. And then GX3, coming in second, and of course they were the old guard. A lot of these kind of retired CS players coming back for like the resurgence, you know, and they came second, which is really, really good. And so they've got a lot of fire, but of course the younger players that are coming into the scene now, particularly like Jazzy, obviously they've just performed exceptionally well.
Jazzy, the baby, esports babies. Zoomers.
Bless her.
you gotta fear the Zoomers. They're just terrifying with their cracked out aim. I think that's what the kids are calling it these days.
Indeed.
I'm so excited to hear how well Team Magical did. I've been seeing, obviously I know Mel from Esports Production. She's worked on behind the cameras a lot of times. She's been an observer, a producer for various events that I've worked. So I've known her in that context, and I've always known that she's been competing. But in Valorant, she's really dedicated herself, and this team have put in just so much time to being as good as they can be. They're really grinding, really working together as a unit, working on their individual game, going through coaching, you know, playing it out. And we saw the result here. They destroyed the competition. There's no two buts about it. They destroyed the competition. And at this point, I'm just excited to see them in an event like the Pulse Invitational, because I think they could make some noise. I think they could do some damage. This is a team that I'm fascinated to see how far they can go. And I'm going to go ahead and repeat the drumbeat that I've seen all over the place on Twitter. Sign Team Magical. If you want a marketable, interesting, energetic team that's on the up and up, go for it. What do you have to lose? Go for it. Sign this team. I think they can do some serious damage.
Well, the rumor mill says that orgs are looking at them. The rumor mill doesn't specify any orgs, but supposedly they are being looked at. And if you go back, if any of you didn't have a chance to go and check out some of their games, go check out that grand final. It was something to behold. These ladies were insane. And I need to just do it one more time, but shout out to Alex Golden Boy for being my co-caster. It's like the coolest experience of my life.
He killed it.
He was incredible, and like one of the, like a really easy person to work with, which was really important for me because I was terrified on that first day. So you know, just made that transition a little bit easier. It's such a good event, man.
It really was. It really was. It was a lot of fun to see, and it seemed like you all were having a ton of fun with the broadcast as well. So well done. Kudos to everyone involved. I know we've got one of the big organizers, Aloe, in chat here, who helped put that event on and helped make it a possibility. Happy to see that go off well. I know you guys got some pretty substantial viewership numbers as well, which is always exciting for the female scene to promote, you know, opportunities for women to play and compete and grow that scene and just make life more accessible for everybody. It's great. It was an awesome tournament. It was an awesome event. Does that cap it off? Any final thoughts on FTW here? Or did you just give them to me?
Yeah, just again, you know, thank you to everybody. It was a Nerd Street Gamers event, so thank you to all of you guys. Nerd Street Gamers does some fantastic stuff, so I assume you guys already follow them.
Like this show. They do some fantastic things. Like, they let us come rant at you guys for a while.
Yeah, and I do love a good rant, so I appreciate that.
Speaking of a good rant, I think we've got a topic to rant about here in a second. We don't really have anything for Recon Bolt because, honestly, there's nothing really announced right now. There's a Nerd Street Gamers Monthly at the end of the month, but that's a ways out, so we're not even really going to talk about that at this point. Otherwise, the calendar for Valorant in both NA and EU is wide the heck open, so please, somebody fill it. Provide us with an event to talk about. We need something. There's a 5K this Sunday, apparently.
Well, look at that.
We'll talk about that when that happens, I guess. But in the meantime, we got some neural theft to talk about. And this one, I'm going to use the stinger because it's very pretty. And then we're going to go ahead and come into... Here we go. This one comes courtesy of our very own Mark Bach-Wilson. Nerd Street Gamers, Mark Bach-Wilson. Here's his tweet talking about the ESEIC scandal, the potential fallout. If players really are going to get dropped / blacklisted for their involvement in the MDL match-fixing scandal, a smaller org could build a roster out of them on the cheap and end up with a pretty powerful lineup. This, of course, assumes that Riot takes no action. Sam, hit me with your initial response here.
Right. So unlike some of the people in the Twitter comment section, I'm not going to assume that Bach is endorsing this idea and saying that these players, you know, shouldn't be punished.
That Bach is a smooth criminal. It makes sense to me.
Yeah, for sure. I did quite like your take on it in the replies as well. So like the mafia theme, which is pretty cool. But in all seriousness, I think he's got a solid point. If for whatever reason Riot decide not to take action, I mean, some of these players are really good. I mean, they got into that league for a reason. I don't think an org, even a small org, would risk it, because you still have a brand, and particularly as a small org, you don't want to ruin your brand right off the bat. I mean, there are some orgs in, and again, I'm going to go back to my Overwatch roots, but there are some orgs in the Overwatch community that no matter how hard they try to rinse their image, they cannot. It has stuck. So if, you know, one of these, like, hindsight, like, oh, we did this dumb thing where we took all these match fixes, but we're really sorry, guys. We've learned our lesson. Like, people are just, the internet is a harsh desert.
Yeah.
And I don't think that any small orgs would do it. But if they just decided to kind of band together and make a team, then yeah, I think they could really cause a ruckus.
I think they'd have to lean into it. They'd have to just fully acknowledge what they were doing. And it's like, look, these guys are pariahs. We're going to take the prize together. We're going to form a leper colony in Valorant. It would be interesting. It would really be interesting to see. One of the interesting points I also saw in response was from Davey, where he said that's assuming they don't face legal repercussions. The reality is match fixing is a crime in most places, folks, and if this is pursued to the fullest extent of the law, betting on a match fix is potentially punishable by jail time, which would be interesting. All I do know is if every rumor is to be believed, this could be real spicy in terms of who's getting removed, and so we could wind up seeing a powerhouse team, provided these players escape further repercussions within the scene. It's going to be interesting. I don't know that I want to see players who threw games intentionally get other opportunities, but it would certainly be a wild thought experiment if we put them all together and see what damage they can do. And
I mean, as Vansili says, like, a lot of TOs might just decide for themselves, like, these players are not welcome. And I think it was
some well.
Yeah, and I saw Mitch, I believe it was in regard to this as well, where he said, well, talent can also just band together and say, we're not working events with known cheaters. Like, you put your foot down. So there are a lot of ways that could stop these teams from being able to compete. But if the stars align and they manage to make themselves a team and they can get into some tournaments, then it could be pretty spicy. But I think with all the roadblocks that could get put into place, it's unlikely.
It is unlikely. And again, just as a quick aside, match fixing, bad, very bad. It ruins the integrity of the scene. It undermines the audience faith in what they're watching. It really kills everybody. You might be making some money in the short term, but really you're taking money out of everybody involved in the scene's pockets in the long term, because you devalue the product that people are putting out. So don't do it. Don't even think about doing it. Do not do it. Let the legacy of iBuyPower stand in your mind of one short-term gain can absolutely torpedo any career you might have had in games for a long, long time. I think that's about going to wrap up our show here, Sam. We've already gone way over our time, which I feel like is this thing I say at every one of these recordings, every one of these podcasts. We will never actually complete a 30-minute show. If we ever
Can you imagine if there were 3 of us?
Yeah, right?
Imagine?
Oh, man, it'd be an hour and a half if Ryan was here. Yeah, if we ever complete a 30-minute show, I'm just going to buy each of you a pizza and send it to you, because I don't think that'll ever happen.
Next week, one sentence answers only.
If you could, I would. I don't believe you're capable. I don't believe you're capable of that. But that is going to wrap it up for us, folks. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed the show, please do follow here on Twitch. Follow the Nerd Street Gamers Twitter as well to know when we're going live, to know when the podcast is up. You can follow us. You can find our ats down below our faces. Mine's at DarfMike. Hers is at Naore Mizuki. So do follow. Did I get it right this time?
You did. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, I'm learning. So do follow those so you know when we're on broadcast or when we're live with this show. It's such a pleasure to bring this to you every week. This is going to be happening every week, Wednesday at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or whatever time it is in your time zone, the same time. It'll also be up on YouTube, I think, tomorrow. Last week's episode is up on YouTube. If you missed it, go watch it. We're going to have a lot of fun with this. We'll see you next time. Bye, everybody. What did I do as our, what's our goodbye cam? Oh, here's the end screen. There we go.